My Hero Academia, The Shadow Legacy Chapter 1 Chapter 1, A Blessing in the Storm. The night sky wept over Muzutafu, painting the city in cold rain and neon reflections. Thunder grumbled far above, casting momentary flashes of white across cracked alley walls and flickering traffic lights. But through the storm, a single figure raced with reckless urgency, boots splashing through puddles, a black coat flapping like the wings of a fallen crow. Toji Fushiguro was bleeding. A gash marked the side of his arm. His knuckles were raw, his body aching from the hellish takedown of a black market Quirk cartel just hours ago. But none of that mattered. Not the bruises. Not the pain. Not even the voice in his calm link demanding debrief. Because tonight wasn't about work. Tonight, Toji was running towards something he never thought he'd deserve. He stormed into the hospital, rain still dripping from his clothes as he slammed his hands on the reception counter. "Where's my wife? Where's Inko?" he barked. The nurse behind the desk jolted. Her eyes went wide the moment she recognized his face. Not because he was a celebrity but because Toji Fushiguro had a reputation in the underground. His face was whispered about in emergency rooms and criminal dens. His stare could silence entire rooms. The clipboard fell from the nurse's hands with a loud clatter. And before she could utter a word, she fainted right then and there. Toji stared at her unconscious form, blinking. "Seriously," he muttered under his breath. A door opened behind him. A middle-aged doctor in a white coat emerged, eyes wide with exhaustion but calm in the chaos. "You must be Fushiguro-san," he said. "Your wife just gave BRTH. Healthy boy." It was a smooth delivery. Toji didn't even reply. He vanished down the hallway before the man could say another word. The maternity ward was quiet, wrapped in that eerie kind of stillness only hospitals had late at night. The kind of silence where emotions breathed the loudest. Toji's boots slowed, water still dripping from his sleeves. He reached a white door with a number scribbled in black marker. He opened it without knocking. Inside, warm light bathed the room in gold. Machines beeped softly. Curtains swayed gently from the window cracked open just enough to let in the night air. The storm outside had mellowed to a drizzle. And on the hospital bed lay Inko Fushiguro, pale but glowing, her chest rising and falling slowly as she held a bundle in her arms. And on the hospital bed lay Inko Fushiguro, pale but glowing, her chest rising and falling slowly as she held a bundle in her arms. Her hair clung to her forehead with sweat. Her green eyes lifted gently as Toji entered. She smiled, tired, worn out, but full of warmth. "Look, Megumi," she whispered softly, her voice barely above the hum of machines. "Your daddy's late." Like always, Toji froze. It was like all the chaos in the world stopped. He moved forward, step by slow step, until he was beside her. The child in her arms was swaddled in a pale blue blanket, his face soft and peaceful. He had a full head of wild black hair, spiky, unruly, familiar. Toji knelt beside the bed. He stared, lips slightly parted, as if afraid to breathe too hard and wake the boy. His hand reached out instinctively, but hovered in the air, unsure if he was even worthy to touch something so fragile. His voice cracked. "You really gave me a brat this cute," he whispered. A weak laugh bubbled out of Inko's throat. "He looks just like you when you're sleeping, scowling even when at peace." Toji choked out a breath that could have been a laugh or a sob. His eyes shimmered with tears he never allowed in battle. He leaned in closer, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me this. For surviving this. For not giving up on me." Inko's fingers brushed his stubbled cheek, smearing a drop of "Careful," she whispered, teasingly. "You're dripping all over my bed." He chuckled, wiping his face roughly. "I ran from a fight to get here. Didn't have time to clean up." Then he looked at the baby again and frowned softly. "Wait, you called him Megumi?" Inko tilted her head. "Yeah. Why?" I thought you were going to name him Izuku, Toji muttered. You said Megumi was too girly for a boy. You made fun of me for liking it. Inko smiled and gently adjusted the blanket around their son. I did, she admitted. But I thought about it while I was holding him. After everything you've gone through, all you've done for me, I thought maybe it was time I listened to you for once. She looked at him, her gaze fond. For my big, buff, stubborn idiot of a husband who ran through the city half dead just to be here, I decided we'd go with the name you loved. Toji swallowed hard. But it means blessing, his voice softened, cracking again. I've never been someone who deserved anything like that. Inko leaned over and kissed his forehead. Well, she whispered, now you do. They sat in silence for a moment, just the three of them. The storm beyond the window had faded into gentle mist, and the world felt quieter. Toji's fingers finally touched his son's tiny hand. The child stirred but didn't cry. And just like that, a man once known as a weapon who lived in shadow and battle felt something break inside him. And something new take its place. Flashback, 3 years earlier the rain came down like needles, unrelenting and sharp. Muzutafu's neon lights blurred into the puddles, painting the sidewalks in reds and blues. People bustled past quickly under umbrellas, trying to avoid the downpour and trying harder to avoid him. Toji Fushiguro walked down the sidewalk, soaked from head to toe. No umbrella. No destination. Just a worn-out coat, torn gloves, and the ever-present aura of someone who didn't belong anywhere. People stepped aside instinctively, some even crossing the street to avoid him. His sharp jaw, messy hair plastered to his forehead, and those cold, sunken eyes, he looked like trouble. The kind of man who'd walk into a bar and leave it burning behind him. But he didn't even glance their way. His stomach growled louder than the thunder above. His fingers were numb. His head ached from 2 nights without sleep. He hadn't eaten in over a day. Just another night. Just another storm. Across the street, a young woman in a support course coat closed her umbrella and shook off the rain from her shoulders. She had just finished her shift with a local agency, working field tech on a hero patrol. Her name tag. Read, Izuku Midoriya. She was tired, damp, and starving. But just as she stepped toward the convenience store, her eyes landed on him. Tall. Alone. Dripping wet. Shivering, though he'd never admit it. His hands were clenched tightly as if holding back the world. Something about him made her pause. And before she could overthink it, before she could talk herself out of it, she walked toward him. Hey, she called, waving her arm as she approached. Toji looked up, one brow raising. No smile. No interest. Just confusion. You all right? She asked casually. You look like you're about to punch the rain. He blinked, silent. Come on, she said, brushing past him without waiting for an answer. There's a diner 2 blocks that way. They don't kick out soaked strays. Stray, he muttered, almost amused, before his stomach growled again. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a half-empty diner that smelled of burnt coffee and old booths. The rain pattered softly on the windows. Inko tossed him a towel from behind the counter and 2 paper cups steamed between them. Toji grunted. I don't have money. Didn't ask, she said, stirring her cup. It's on me. TCH, he stared at her, eyes narrowing a little. You're either really dumb or really kind. Probably both, she replied, sipping. Toji dried his hair, eyes watching her from beneath the towel. Her cheeks were slightly flushed from the cold, or maybe it was because she realized how close they were sitting. He broke the silence first. I'm broke, he said bluntly. No home. No license. No family. She blinked, but didn't interrupt. Grew up in an orphanage. My parents dumped me there before I could walk. Everyone thought I was quirkless, 'cause I didn't register one. But I've got something, his fingers flexed slightly. Something different. I call it heavenly restriction. Sounds intimidating, Inko said carefully. He let out a dry laugh. It is. No fancy energy beams. No explosions. Just raw strength. I can crush metal, leap buildings, rip through walls. Some guy once told me I might be on par with All Might. But it doesn't matter when no one knows your name. Why didn't you go pro? No license. No agency would take a nobody who punches through buildings without flashy lights or feel-good speeches. Took a few jobs. Warehouse work. Bodyguard gigs. Got screwed over a dozen times. Lost my place last week. He sighed and stared into his coffee. Now you found me, Greenie. Inko blinked, a little confused. Greenie. You're wearing green, he said flatly. She pouted. At least respect the person paying for your coffee, JRK. He smirked. First time all night. Fair enough. And you're not the only orphan around, by the way, Inko added quietly, her fingers tightening around her cup. My mom, she left me and my brother at an orphanage when I was 10. I go back to visit sometimes, but yeah. We're not that different, you and me. A quiet settled over them, not quite awkward, but heavy. Raindrops tapped the glass behind them. The smell of warm coffee lingered between breaths. Then, out of nowhere, wanna live with me, she asked. Toji choked slightly on his drink. Huh. I mean just for now, she rushed. I have a small place, it's nothing fancy. I don't exactly own much that anyone would steal. You don't look like a thief, and look, I'm just trying to help, alright. Toji blinked, eyebrows raised. You sure, he said slowly. You're not afraid of me. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. Why would I be afraid of some soaking, coffee-drinking hobo with puppy eyes? Toji raised an eyebrow. Puppy eyes. Yeah, she waved him off. Anyway, I have one extra futon. Don't make me regret this. Toji leaned back, a smirk creeping up on his lips. For real this time. Then he looked her straight in the eye. You know, you look way too cute when you're angry. She nearly dropped her cup. Her cheeks exploded with color. Why you? Too late, he said, sipping his coffee with that devilish smirk. I'm taking the futon. Living together hadn't been the plan. But somehow it worked. It started with a futon in the corner of Inko's tiny apartment, old tatami floors, a rickety table, one kettle, and 2 mismatched coffee mugs. Toji kept his things in a single duffel bag. He wasn't the talking type. Not unless she forced it out of him. But he always made sure to take out the trash. He fixed the squeaky door. He replaced the broken leg on her table without saying a word. At night, they'd sit by the window, sharing cheap ramen and canned coffee, talking about everything and nothing. He never smiled much, but when he did, it was always when he looked at her. But peace wasn't eternal. So, came the voice one Saturday morning, full of mischief and judgment. You gonna tell me who this tall, brooding badass is, or should I assume you picked up a villain off the street? Inko nearly spit her tea. Mitsuki Bakugo, her old classmate and current alum, leaned on the doorway with arms crossed and a sly grin tugging at her lips. Platinum blonde hair tied messily back, sharp eyes locked onto the man lazily sitting cross-legged on the floor in a black tank top, sipping coffee like he owned the place. Toji raised an eyebrow. Who the hell is this? Mitsuki jabbed a thumb at her chest. Best friend. Concerned citizen. Local fire hazard. Pick one. Inko sighed. Mitsuki, this is Toji. He's staying here for a while. Staying. Mitsuki smirked. Come on, Inko. Spill it. Is this guy your boyfriend or what? Toji didn't even blink. He sipped his coffee, then looked her dead in the eye. Yeah, I'm her boyfriend. Any problem with that, or you jealous she got someone better than you? The air snapped like a live wire. Mitsuki's eye twitched. What did you just say, Terminator reject? Toji stood up with a stretch, grinning now. You heard me, bottle blonde. Oh, you wanna go? The next 5 seconds involved Mitsuki swinging a kitchen towel like a WHP, chasing Toji around the table while Inko screamed for them to stop. TJI stopped teasing her. Mitsuki put the cup down, not the cup. When it finally ended, Toji had a spoon stuck in his hair, Mitsuki had one shoe missing, and Inko had a headache the size of Camino ward. Later that night, as Toji silently reattached the kitchen cabinet Mitsuki had kicked open during their friendly brawl, Inko stood beside him, arms crossed. You didn't have to provoke her, you know. She asked a question, he muttered. I answered. She rolled her eyes. And called her jealous. He smirked. She started it. You're impossible. Toji leaned against the counter, arms folded. She's protective of you. Inko blinked. You have people who care about you, he continued, quieter now. I don't have that. So I'm figuring it out. Her gaze softened. You do now. The next week, Inko found herself standing in front of Principal Nizu's office at UA, nervous but determined. Inside sat the tiny yet brilliant mouse-quirked principal, sipping tea on a tall desk. Thank you for meeting me, Inko said, bowing slightly. I wanted to ask for a favor. Nizu tilted his head. Oh. Not like you to sound so serious, Midoriya-san. What's on your mind? She straightened her back. There's someone I've been helping. He's not a villain. He's just never had a real chance. She took a breath. He has a quirk that's not flashy, but dangerous. He calls it heavenly restriction. No energy projections, no fireballs, just pure, terrifying strength. On par with All Might, if not more. But he's never had guidance. Never had support. Nizu blinked. That's quite the claim. Inko nodded. I know it sounds crazy, but he's saved people. Quietly. No credit. He wants to help. I think he just needs someone to believe in him. Her fingers clenched into fists. UA helped me. The support course gave me direction, a future, confidence. I think if we give him the same, he could do more good than anyone expects. She bowed again, deeply. I know this isn't protocol, and he's not exactly hero material on paper, but if there's anything you can do to help him register for a license or get him the right contact, I'd be grateful. Nizu stared at her for a moment, silent. Then he smiled. Send him in. Toji stepped into the sleek, minimalistic office, his boots making little sound against the polished floor. The scent of fresh tea lingered in the air, mixed with a subtle fragrance of fresh paper and ink. Across from him sat Principal Nizu, the tiny, fur-covered mouse-like figure behind an imposing desk. The large windows of the office offered a sweeping view of UA's campus. But Toji wasn't interested in the scenery. Nizu's beady eyes watched him, the flicker of intelligence clear in them. You must be Toji Fushiguro, Nizu said, his voice soft but commanding. I've heard a lot about you. And I must say, I am quite intrigued by your unique quirk. Toji simply stood there, arms crossed, leaning against the desk as he surveyed the room. Yeah, you've heard the rumors, he said, nonchalantly. Heavenly restriction. I'm the guy with the raw strength and no flashy powers. But I'm not here to talk about that. He gave a half-smirk. I don't need a hero license, just some way to make a living and keep the people safe. Nizu raised a brow. Well, Toji, you see, that's where I can help. You've proven your strength in underground operations, but a true hero needs more than just power. He leaned forward slightly. To become a fully recognized hero, you need to be trained, tested, and evaluated. We can help you get there, but first, you'll need to pass some tests. Toji sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Tests, huh? Look, I'm not great at theory. If you're talking about multiple choice questions or any subjective stuff, I'll be straight with you, I'm terrible at that. Nizu chuckled softly. I imagine so. Your strength alone isn't enough. It's about understanding the heart of being a hero. That means strategy, adaptability, and decision-making under pressure. Toji scowled. I'm good in combat. Better than most, actually. But if you think I'm gonna be filling out a paper on hero philosophy or fighting techniques with a pencil, you've got the wrong guy. I see. Nizu smiled knowingly. Well, no need to worry about that. There will be a written portion, but it's not the focus. What I want to see, Toji, is how you perform in a real situation. Your strengths, your instincts, how well you handle pressure. Toji's eyes glinted with a smirk. Now you're talking my language. Combat, challenges, those are my specialty. Good, Nizu said, leaning back in his chair. I'll have Aizawa and a few other faculty members run you through some trials. If you pass, we'll begin working on the necessary paperwork and requirements for your license. Toji didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. When do we start? Nizu's smile widened slightly. Immediately. A short time later, Toji found himself standing in one of UA's specialized combat arenas, waiting for the trials to begin. The walls were lined with various gadgets and weapons, designed to simulate different dangerous scenarios. Aizawa stood nearby, watching quietly. His disheveled appearance and tired eyes made him look perpetually annoyed, but Toji could tell there was a sharpness behind the exhaustion. So, you're the one everyone's been talking about. Aizawa said, not even sparing Toji a glance. Let's get this over with. We'll start simple. I'll throw some obstacles your way. You show me what you've got. If you're worth it, we'll move on to the harder stuff. Toji smirked. I'm ready. Aizawa's tired eyes flickered to Nizu, who nodded silently. Alright, Fushiguro. Here's your first test. The arena transformed before Toji's eyes, the floor shifting and rising in various patterns. Walls slid into place, creating a series of obstacles that would challenge even the most seasoned hero in a rescue scenario. Dummies designed to mimic civilians were scattered across the area, some standing, others in need of assistance. This is a standard rescue test, Aizawa explained, crossing his arms. Save the civilians without wrecking the entire place. Don't destroy anything unnecessarily. Show us your ability to think. Toji's eyes scanned the surroundings. His body hummed with excitement. He cracked his neck and cracked his knuckles. Alright, let's get started, he muttered under his breath. Without a second thought, he lunged forward, his muscles rippling under his shirt as he ripped through the obstacles with ease. He grabbed one of the civilians by the arm and tossed him gently to the side, clearing his path. Toji wasn't interested in subtlety, he simply bulldozed through it all. He picked up speed as he dodged a few falling debris pieces, kicking over a heavy piece of concrete and hurling it aside. The walls and obstacles shifted to create new challenges, but Toji didn't flinch. He was in his element now. Aizawa and Nizu watched from the sidelines. Not bad, Aizawa said after a while, nodding slightly as Toji tore through the last of the obstacles. But you're not thinking about the bigger picture. This isn't just about raw strength. You need to show restraint. You need to think about the civilians. Toji paused, breathless but not even breaking a sweat. Civilians, huh? You want me to play hero? I'll save them. But if I have to play it safe, we're wasting time. He looked at Aizawa with a smirk. Guess I'm not your typical hero. Aizawa crossed his arms. Exactly. But that's why we're here. To test your limits. Nizu nodded as well, watching closely. You've passed the initial trial. But there's more to being a hero than just saving people. We'll push you harder. Mentally. Strategically. Can you think outside the box when the stakes are higher? Toji wiped the sweat off his brow, eyeing them both. I'll pass whatever test you throw at me. Just make it quick. 2 hours later. The testing simulations had chewed up and spat out dozens of would-be heroes over the years. Maze-like obstacle courses. Villain ambushes with unpredictability AI. Weighted zone lockdowns that simulated rescue missions under collapsing buildings. Pressure-based hostage situations requiring quick thinking and fast reflexes. Toji Fushiguro didn't just pass them, he shattered their records. In one simulation, he cleared a hostage villain setup in under 1 minute and 30 seconds. In another, he leapt 4 stories straight up barefoot, dragged a dummy civilian from under 2 tons of fake rubble, then proceeded to bench press the entire slab just to show off. Aizawa didn't even blink when Toji snapped a combat robot in half with his bare hands. Nizu, however, sipped his tea and jotted something down. Note: structural reinforcement required for future combat bots. In a hostage negation simulation, when the AI villain shouted, "Don't come closer," and pointed a gun at the dummy, Toji simply threw a nearby table at 300 km/h, tackled the bot, and disabled it in under 3 seconds. Aizawa muttered from the observation booth, "I can't tell if he's terrifying or efficient." But then came the written exam. A single piece of paper. 25 questions. Basic literacy, middle school level arithmetic, and hero ethics questions. Toji stared at it like it was written in Martian. He tapped his pen twice, then sighed and rubbed his temple. Which of the following situations would require crowd control protocol first? If Villain A and Villain B begin fighting in a market, who should be prioritized, civilians or capturing the villains? If you spend 1,320 yen on medical supplies and earn a reward of 4,000 yen, how much is your net income? Toji wrote, "I punch Villain A, Villain B will shut up. You save whoever's bleeding first. Don't care. I'm broke." By the time he handed it in, he'd answered half the sheet and drawn a small sketch of Nizu with boxing gloves on the back page. Later, in the principal's office, Aizawa held Toji's test sheet up like it physically offended him. His eye twitched. How are you a combat genius and still can't do middle school math?" Toji shrugged with zero guilt. Didn't have the luxury of school. Or money. Or parents who cared. Aizawa grunted, pinching his nose. "You spelled villain with 1 L. 3 times. Toji raised a brow. "Still beat the villain, didn't I?" Nizu chuckled quietly, setting the file aside. "Well, Toji-san, your written score is abysmal, possibly one of the worst we've ever seen." "Cool," Toji replied, deadpan. "So do I fail?" Nizu smiled even wider. "Not exactly. You passed the practicals with unprecedented results. And to be quite honest," he clasped his paws, "you're not aiming to be a public hero. You're more suited for underground work, like Aizawa here." Aizawa nodded. "You work in the shadows. Quiet rescues. Villain dismantling. Stealth operations. That kind of role doesn't require speeches or writing reports. You'd work under a handler, and they'd do most of the legal paperwork." Toji grinned. "So I get to beat up criminals and not do homework. Sign me up. We still expect basic comprehension, Fushiguro. I can spell punch just fine." Aizawa sighed again. Nizu offered a paw. "Welcome to the start of your hero license probation program, Toji Fushiguro. You'll undergo 6 months of monitored missions before being approved for independent underground operations." Toji shook his hand, grip firm, eyes lit with fire. "Thanks, Chinchilla. I owe you one." Nizu blinked. "I'm a mouse." "Sure. Keep telling yourself that." That night, back at the apartment, Inko stood at the stove cooking simple curry rice when Toji walked in, soaked again but this time from the training arena's sprinklers. She turned with concern. So. What happened? Did they say yes? Toji tossed his jacket onto the futon, dropped onto the floor, and groaned. I passed. Somehow. I'm now officially a hero in training. Underground. Inko gasped. That's amazing. He looked up at her with a rare, tired smile. Yeah, they said I'm an elite combat monster with the brain of a dry rock. She laughed, covering her mouth. Sounds about right. He huffed. I don't get it. Villains I can deal with. Math. No chance. Inko served him a plate, sat beside him, and handed him chopsticks. You don't need to be a genius, she said warmly, you just need to have a good heart. He blinked at her. Then softly, you gave me that. It was one of those rare nights when the air felt lighter. The apartment lights glowed warmly against the drizzling rain outside. The smell of curry still lingered in the kitchen, and the little second-hand radio by the window played soft music just enough to fill the silence without intruding on it. Toji sat at the low table, eyes squinting at a small bottle in his hands, the label shining with golden characters. Wait, he muttered, is this? Inko grinned, setting down 2 small cups. Sake. Nizu gave it to me today, said I deserved a bonus for bringing a combat wrecking ball to you, she giggled. His words, not mine. Toji raised an eyebrow. Didn't think the rodent ran on alcohol appreciation. Inko poured the sake into the cups and nudged one toward him. He said it's top shelf. Probably meant for faculty dinners, but hey, I'm not wasting it on Eraserhead and his instant noodles. Toji chuckled, just a little. You're dangerous, Midoriya. She raised her cup. To making it through hell and surviving with your bones intact. He clinked his cup to hers. And to finally drinking something that wasn't expired by 2 years. They both laughed. Time passed. 1 cup turned into 2. 2 turned into 4. And by the 6th, Inko's cheeks were flushed pink, her words slower and slurred, eyes glossy with warmth and the comfort of safety. Toji was still mostly fine, his body burned through alcohol almost too efficiently, but he wasn't used to seeing her like this. Inko leaned sideways against the table, cup in hand, eyes half closed but sparkling. You know, she slurred, swirling the sake in her cup, I used to think love was for dumb people. The way they'd cry in movies and talk about destiny and fate and all that mushy crp, I used to laugh. Toji raised an eyebrow, sipping his sake. This gonna end in you crying or punching me? She giggled, shaking her head. Neither, probably. There was a long pause as the rain hit the windows softly. Then she looked at him, really looked at him with a quiet sort of affection that made the air thicken. You're not what I expected, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He blinked. What? You're mean. You scowl too much. You eat like you've never had a real meal in your life. And you sleep on the floor like a dog. Toji frowned. Okay, thanks for the roast, but, she interrupted, smiling gently, you also fix things without asking. You always check the locks twice. You make sure I don't burn the rice. You don't talk much, but when you do, you mean every word. And you make me feel safe. Her head wobbled a little as she leaned forward. Toji didn't move. His eyes widened slightly. I like you, you know, she whispered. Like. And before he could say anything, before he could process the fact that Inko Midoriya, the strongest-willed woman he'd ever met, just confessed her feelings, she leaned in and kissed him on the lips. Soft. Sudden. Unbalanced. His eyes blinked wide in shock. She pulled back a second later, wobbling slightly. Hey, you taste like soy sauce and alcohol. Toji stared at her. She stared back. And then thud. She slumped over the table, fast asleep. Sake cup still in her hand. Toji sat there in stunned silence, cup still in his hand. The hell just happened, he muttered. He looked at her again. At her sleeping face, mouth slightly open, a soft breath escaping, strands of hair sticking to her flushed cheek. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Drunk idiot, but his voice wasn't harsh. In fact, it was barely above a whisper. And it carried a strange softness. Toji reached out, gently removing the cup from her hand and setting it aside. He stood, picked her up like she weighed nothing, and laid her down carefully on her futon, pulling the blanket up over her shoulders. As he turned to leave, her hand grabbed his shirt in her sleep. Toji, she murmured. He paused, turning his head slightly. A faint smile played on her lips. Don't go. His heart skipped just for a moment. TCH, he muttered, sitting back down beside her. You're gonna regret this in the morning. But he didn't leave. Not that night. Next morning the soft rays of morning sunlight filtered through the worn curtains of the small apartment, casting golden light across the wooden floor. Birds chirped outside, and the soft hum of city life began to wake. But inside, a completely different tension stirred. Izuku Midoriya blinked slowly, her head pounding like drums from the sake hangover. She groaned, hand lazily reaching for her blanket only to realize something warm was holding her tightly. She froze. Eyes snapped open. Toji Fushiguro was hugging her. His arms were securely wrapped around her waist, his face resting peacefully against her shoulder, breathing slow and steady. One of her legs was tangled with his. Their fingers intertwined. Panic. Realization. Memory crash. I like you. She kissed him. Oh God. She kissed him. Inko's entire body flushed pink. Did he remember? Was he still pretending to sleep? Did she talk in her sleep? She didn't move. She didn't breathe. You snore when you're drunk, Toji mumbled suddenly, his voice rough and mourning deep. Inko died inside. He cracked one eye open lazily and smirked. You also kiss like you mean it. She let out the most high-pitched, muffled screech into the pillow. Tijai. Toji yawned, completely unfazed, still not letting her go. Relax. I didn't do anything. You passed out after that one kiss. I just didn't feel like sleeping on the floor. Why you're hugging me? You pulled me closer. I what? She sat up suddenly, flailing only for him to grab her hand again. I didn't mind, he added, quieter. His voice was a bit more serious now. So don't panic. Her heart skipped again. Before she could respond, knock knock knock. Inko. You better not be hiding a man in there again, came the familiar voice of Mitsuki Bakugo, rough and impatient. Inko blanched. No no no, babe, calm down, came Masaru's sleepy voice from behind the door. She probably just overslept. Toji stretched with a groan. You got a firecracker friend with a bat. She's gonna murder you if she sees this. The door slammed open. Inkou, Mitsuki froze. Masaru peeked in behind her. There, in full view, was Inko in bed. Flushed face, disheveled hair. And next to her, Toji shirtless, arms still resting casually on the blanket, looking like he'd slept like a log and had zero regrets. Their hands were still lightly touching. Mitsuki's eyes widened. Then narrowed. Then she grinned with fire in her eyes. I knew it, she said, slowly cracking her knuckles. I knew there was something going on between you two. Inko scrambled. Mitsuki, it's not. Toji yawned and sat up fully, stretching his absurdly muscular torso in plain view. Morning, Blondie. Mitsuki's grin dropped into a snarl. You call me Blondie again, and I will chop off your DMN fingers and feed them to a pack of wild strays. Masaru flinched. Mitsu breathed. Toji blinked. Then deadpanned, cool. I'm left-handed anyway. Mitsu, please don't kill my almost boyfriend. Inko shrieked, shielding Toji with her blanket like it was sacred armor. Mitsuki crossed her arms, huffing. Look, I don't care if he's All Might's secret clone or a punching machine built by Nizu, but if he hurts you, I'll burn him to ash. Toji stood up slowly and walked over to her, stopping just a foot away. Then he looked Mitsuki straight in the eyes. I know I'm rough. I know I've got a past. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, he glanced over at Inko, who was still panicking under the blanket. It's that this woman saved me long before she ever kissed me. Inko froze. Masaru smiled. Mitsuki stared at him. After a few tense seconds, she clicked her tongue. TCH. You better mean that. Toji gave a soft nod. Every DMN word. Mitsuki rolled her eyes. Fine. I'll allow it. Then she grabbed Masaru's wrist and stomped out of the apartment, muttering, let's go. These lovebirds clearly need to finish their emotional confession arc. The door slammed shut. Silence returned. Toji turned to Inko, who was still hiding in the blanket. So breakfast. You're the worst, she mumbled from under the covers. He leaned closer with a small smirk. And yet you kissed me. She screamed into the blanket again. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And somehow, despite his brutal job, his cold reputation, and his shut-off heart, Toji Fushiguro found himself living again. Not just surviving. Waking up to warm curry and the scent of fresh coffee. Returning from night patrols to someone waiting, someone worrying. Someone who smiled at him like he was worth saving. Toji and Inko were officially dating now, though official was a stretch, considering it was only Mitsuki screaming, told you so, that made them admit it publicly. Still, things were good. He worked hard missions in the dead of night, brawling with villains the public didn't even know existed. No glory. No applause. Just silent battles in abandoned warehouses and empty alleys. But for every broken rib and torn knuckle, he was paid. Handsomely. And Toji didn't waste a yen. By the time winter passed, he'd saved up enough for a ring. 1 week later, Toji stood outside a small jewelry shop, gripping a small black box in his coat pocket. His fingers twitched. His heart, a man who once had nothing, beat faster than any time he'd ever thrown a punch. Aizawa had been watching him for a while. You're sweating, Fushiguro. Toji grunted. I fought 6 villains last week and didn't bleed. But this is terrifying. Aizawa sipped his coffee, unimpressed. You're proposing to Inko. Not detonating a bomb. Same difference, Toji muttered. That night, he cooked for her. Rare event. Steamed rice, grilled fish, and some attempt at miso soup that Inko very politely didn't critique too hard. And just before dessert he got down on one knee. No crowd. No rose petals. Just the dim light of their tiny kitchen and 2 hearts that had come from nothing. Inko Midoriya, he said, trying not to mess up his words. You gave me a life I didn't think I deserved. You gave me peace in a world that always wanted war. So marry me. She froze. Then tears welled in her eyes as she dropped to her knees too, hugging him tight. You absolute idiot, she whispered. Took you long enough. The wedding problem, there was just one issue. Money. Covered. Love. Infinite. Wedding venue. Non-existent. They had no family homes. No temples or fancy halls to use. And renting a place in Tokyo was a financial nightmare. Toji shrugged it off. We can just sign papers. That's enough. But Aizawa, overhearing that in the break room, scowled. You really think that woman waited all this time just for paperwork? Toji blinked. You got a point. So Aizawa went to Nizu. And Nizu delivered. You, High's largest training stadium was transformed just for one day. Where once robots battled and students trained, there were now paper lanterns, freshly laid wooden flooring, a makeshift altar, and flower decorations put together by students and teachers alike. The guests. Heroes. Lots of them. All Might stood near the altar, holding the ceremonial role of officiant, grinning with tears in his eyes. Present Mike DJ'd the reception. Cementos carved their initials into a stone wall. Midnight cried 5 times and gave Toji a loaded, "If you hurt her, I'll make sure you feel it." Even Recovery Girl showed up. "I'm not healing any wedding night injuries, though," she warned. Then there was Mitsuki, in a sharp red kimono, holding a glass of champagne and muttering curses like, "DMN it, Inko. You beat me to it." Masaru only laughed. "Well, you said you'd only marry me if Inko got hitched first." "Yeah, well, she wasn't supposed to beat me by 3 months." Toji stood at the altar, in a dark charcoal suit, hair tied back, his scar visible but his eyes soft. And then she walked in. Inko Midoriya, in a flowing pale green kimono, adorned in subtle floral patterns. Her hair was tied in a gentle bun, eyes wide with emotion. She walked slowly but surely. Toji stared. And for a man built for killing he felt like he could cry. The ceremony was simple. The vows were quiet. But when they exchanged rings, Toji said just one thing, his voice low but raw, "You saved me from myself. And I'll never stop fighting to be the man you believe I am." Chapter 2 Would you have believed it? The apartment was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt cold or lonely but the kind soaked in warmth. The kind that lingered with the scent of evening tea and a sleeping baby's breath. Through the wide window, the gentle rain drizzled over Tokyo's rooftops, painting soft ripples down the glass. Toji Fushiguro leaned back on the couch, hair still damp from his evening shower, a rare peaceful smile tugging at the corners of his lips. His right arm was wrapped gently around the woman beside him, who rested her head on his shoulder, a cozy blanket pulled over both their laps. Inko Fushiguro let out a small sigh, eyes fluttering closed for a moment as she rocked the small bundle of blankets in her arms. Megumi Fushiguro, who'd finally dozed off after an hour of fussing. His tiny hand poked out from the fabric, clinging softly to the edge of Inko's sleeve. His hair already dark and wild like his father's, his brows knitted even in sleep, like he was preparing for battle with pacifiers and dream monsters. Toji looked over at his wife, his voice low and amused. "Hey, be honest with me for a second." Inko hummed softly, eyes still half-lidded. Toji smirked. "If someone told you 5 years ago that you'd be married to a broke underground fighter with no manners, who steals your coffee, gets into bar fights, and never studied for a test in his life, that you'd go on a honeymoon to London with him, buy a house together, and raise a kid with that same idiot," he chuckled, "would you have believed it?" Inko opened one eye lazily. Then smiled, the kind of smile that was reserved only for Toji and Megumi. "Nope," she said simply. Toji laughed. "Didn't think so." She turned to him, shifting Megumi slightly in her arms so the baby could curl into her chest. "But I would have hoped for it," she added, voice soft. Toji blinked, caught off guard. "You're the best thing to ever happen to me after Mitsuki," Inko whispered, brushing her fingers through Megumi's soft hair. "You're the only one who gave me something I didn't think I could ever have. A family." Toji swallowed hard. He wasn't good at emotions. Never had been. But with these two everything cracked open a little easier. She glanced down at their son, smiling. "Megumi-kun, you made me wait 9 whole months in my stomach. You kicked so much I thought you were training in there. And now you're here looking just like your daddy." Toji peeked at the baby. "Tch, poor kid." Inko slapped his arm gently. Toji leaned in closer, resting his forehead against hers. "He's lucky. If he ends up with half your heart and half my strength, he's gonna be something special. Don't let him near knives until he's 12. No promises." They both laughed quietly, careful not to wake their son. A few minutes passed in silence. Just rain tapping against the windows and the soft hum of Megumi's breath. Toji closed his eyes and murmured, "I still don't know why you picked me." Inko leaned into him tighter. "Because you chose to stay even when you thought you didn't deserve to." She reached out and grabbed his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Because you loved me when no one else even knew how." Toji looked down at their joined hands. Rough. Scarred. But steady. He kissed her temple, whispered, "Then I'm staying forever." The rain had calmed to a soft drizzle outside as gentle music played in the Fushiguro apartment. Inko was humming quietly while rocking a drowsy Megumi in her arms, and Toji sat nearby polishing one of his training weights. It was one of those rare moments of calm that parents of newborns only dream of. Then bang bang bang. The door practically shook off its hinges. "Inko," came the unmistakable voice of Mitsuki Bakugo, loud and raw like a rocket launcher going off indoors. Inko hissed, eyes wide. He just fell asleep. But it was too late. Little Megumi blinked awake, eyes going wide, Inko sighed with dramatic pain as she got up and gently rocked him again. Seriously. He finally stopped crying after 2 hours. Toji looked toward the door. "If she's here to fight, I'm grabbing a chair." Mitsuki kicked the door open with flair, wearing her usual over-the-top outfit, hair pinned back like she just stormed out of a modeling shoot. "Okay, so," she marched in before even closing the door, "was it true? Masaru told me Megumi tried to say his first word and it sounded like, lower your voice." Inko whisper yelled, shielding Megumi's head with a blanket. "You woke him up, you gremlin." Mitsuki blinked. "Oh. My bad." Toji looked at her like she just stepped on a landmine. Define, "my bad." Mitsuki brushed past him and plopped on the couch. "So, listen. Masaru said you were trying to teach Megumi to say, Dad, right?" Inko gave her a tired nod. "Yeah, why?" "Well, Katsuki heard Masaru playing the clip of Megumi trying to say, duh, and Katsuki screamed, the F, right after." Inko's eyes went wide. "What?" Mitsuki crossed her arms. "And then he followed it with, DMN. He's not even 2 yet. What the hell is wrong with my brat?" Toji turned slowly toward her. "You do realize you swear more than a villain in HNDCFFS, right?" Inko stood up, gently bouncing Megumi to calm him again, eyes narrowed with mom fury. "Don't even try it, Mitsuki. You're the one who swears around Katsuki. You say every curse in the book before breakfast. You told me he once repeated dumbass explosion face in daycare." Mitsuki gasped. "I did not." "You absolutely did," Toji cut in, smirking. "You told me. You were proud of it." Mitsuki folded her arms, pretending to pout. "Okay, maybe once. But still. Now your baby's gonna be throwing around F-bombs like Katsuki." Inko gently rocked Megumi as he hiccuped in her arms. "Not my little Megumi-kun. He's a polite baby. He sleeps, eats, and stares like his daddy, not swears like a tiny grenade." Toji raised an eyebrow. "He also punched me in the face last week while crying. He was learning to grab things." Inko defended. Mitsuki grinned. "I like this kid already." Inko glared at her. "You're not allowed to babysit." Toji, watching the chaos unfold, chuckled. "Should we just raise them to be sparring partners now?" "No," Inko said flatly. "Megumi is going to be gentle. He'll have shadows, sure, but manners too." Mitsuki scoffed. "If he's anything like you two, I give it 3 years before he's dragging Katsuki into trouble." "I'll give it 1, Toji muttered. A few minutes later, Megumi finally drifted back to sleep, his tiny hand curled around Inko's finger. The room fell quiet again, save for the occasional snort from Mitsuki as she scrolled through her phone, laughing at old baby videos. Toji stretched. So. Still think we're the bad influence? Mitsuki raised a brow. Nah. I still think you're terrifying. But somehow good at this. Inko smiled tiredly. We try. Now please stop shouting. Fine, fine. Mitsuki stood up. Next time I'll just barge in with a foghorn. Inko and Toji spoke at the same time, don't you dare. Just as the room had begun to settle, the door creaked open again, this time less like an explosion, and more like the exhausted sigh of someone clinging to the last shred of patience. Masaru Bakugo stepped in, his hair disheveled, shirt slightly stained with juice, and a very grumpy, red-eyed Katsuki slumped on his hip like a tiny time bomb. Sorry, Masaru muttered, breathless, I'm just catching up. Inko blinked. Wait, why are you coming in after Mitsuki? Masaru closed the door behind him, his voice drenched in resignation. She ran all the way here. He adjusted Katsuki in his arms, groaning. Just took off yelling something about Inko plotting something behind her back. Left me with this one. He jostled Katsuki gently. He cried the whole way. Katsuki sniffled, rubbing his eyes against Masaru's shoulder, his tiny fingers clinging to his dad's jacket. I finally calmed him down after a full 20 minutes of kicking and screaming, and through the entire walk here, he was shouting. Masaru paused and deadpanned, "The FDMN. The FDMN. On repeat. Like some kind of angry parrot." Toji barked out a laugh, barely hiding it behind his hand. Inko gasped. Masaru. I know. Masaru cried. It was like escorting a tiny drunk delinquent through the city. At that moment, Katsuki peeked up, his puffy red eyes scanning the room. He saw Toji. His face went pale like he'd just seen the villain from a cautionary bedtime story. He froze. Then snapped his head toward his mother, now lounging comfortably on the couch with her feet up. Mama. He began to wiggle violently, trying to escape Masaru's arms and run toward Mitsuki like she was his last hope. Oi. Katsuki. Mitsuki reached out. What's gotten into you? Toji stood from the couch slowly, towering like a mountain of muscle and cold intimidation. He gave the toddler a slow smirk, one eyebrow raised, arms crossed over his chest. Well, he said dryly. Looks like your brat knows who has the authority here, Blondie. Mitsuki glared at him. Authority, my butt. He's just scared of your scary mug. Toji stepped closer, looming playfully. Katsuki immediately turned around in Masaru's arms and buried his face in his dad's chest, muttering something unintelligible that might have been "de fudge." Masaru shook with laughter. He just learned the survival instinct. Toji chuckled. Smart kid. Inko tried and failed not to giggle as she rocked Megumi gently in her arms. Toji, stop scaring the children. He's already terrified enough. To be fair, Masaru added, you do look like someone who eats toddlers for breakfast. I only eat rude ones, Toji replied without skipping a beat. Yours is halfway there. Hey. Mitsuki shouted. No one's roasting my gremlin except me. As the bickering resumed, Katsuki peeked again toward Toji from the safety of Masaru's shoulder, giving a shy glare, but Toji just gave him a silent smirk and two fingers raised in mock salute. Katsuki blinked. Then looked at Megumi. Then slowly raised a tiny hand and waved very cautiously. Megumi blinked back with his usual serious stare and a drooly yawn. Masaru smiled. There. They're bonding already. Toji shook his head. More like Megumi's planning world domination and Katsuki just realized he's not the alpha. Mitsuki rolled her eyes. Yeah. Just wait till they're 3 and starting fires together. Inko sighed lovingly, patting Megumi's back. I have a feeling our boys are going to grow up very loud. Loud, Masaru echoed. And explosive. Loud, explosive, and cursed, Toji muttered. Just like their moms. Ichiwai, both women snapped in unison. Their husbands cool, calm, and with the reflexes of men who had dodged explosions and evil villains did not flinch. Toji just looked up, deadpan, arms folded across his chest. Masaru raised his coffee mug slowly to his lips. The two women glared harder. What? Toji said. Masaru blinked innocently. What? It's true. Toji nodded like a sage. Exactly what I was thinking. Inko narrowed her eyes. Excuse me. Masaru gestured gently toward the room. I mean your temper, Mitsuki. Your kid literally tried to bite a watermelon yesterday because you said, I'm gonna crush it like this, and then punched it. Yeah. Mitsuki snapped. He's got a fighting spirit. Toji tilted his head. He's got your mouth. And your forehead vein. Masaru added, pointing. Mitsuki gasped and looked to Inko. Are you hearing this? Inko crossed her arms. Toji. You just called me cursed. Toji looked confused. You are. Cursed in a cute way. Inko blinked. That doesn't save you. Masaru raised a finger. But let's be real. You do mutter curse words when you're frustrated. I say, sugar crackers. Inko defended, scandalized. That's just your censored version, Mitsuki mumbled, suspiciously smiling. I heard you say, I take mushrooms the other day. Inko buried her face in Megumi's blanket. Toji tried not to laugh and failed. TCH. I rest my case. Masaru chuckled. It's okay, honey. We love you. You're just chaotic. Both of you, Toji added, gesturing between Inko and Mitsuki. Cute. Scary. But cute. Inko grumbled. You're lucky you're good-looking. Mitsuki rolled her eyes. You're lucky he's got abs. Toji smirked. I do. Masaru raised his hand. I don't, but I make great omelets. A beat of silence passed. Then Inko sighed. You know what? Fine. We are scary moms. Mitsuki cracked her knuckles. And proud. Toji, Inko said sweetly, why don't you make some tea while I don't throw your weights off the balcony? Copy that, Mrs. Fushiguro, he muttered and stood up quickly, heading for the kitchen like a soldier dodging landmines. Masaru lifted Katsuki again. Guess I'm on baby duty. Come on, kiddo, let's go find the TV remote. Defu, Katsuki started. Nope. Masaru yelled, covering his mouth instantly. Nope. We're cutting that one off early. Mitsuki sighed. Too late. He's got the full bakugo. Toji called from the kitchen. So does the dog. Better train him now. Katsuki suddenly turned, pointed at Toji from across the room and yelled, TCH. The room went dead silent. Toji stared at him. Masaru's jaw dropped. Mitsuki choked. Did he just? Inko gasped. He copied Toji. Toji narrowed his eyes. He dares challenge the alpha. Masaru, holding back a laugh, oh no, he's trying to outsmirk you now. Katsuki, TCH. TCH, TCH. Toji cracked his knuckles. Masaru whispered to Katsuki, son. If we never see you again after this, know that I loved you. For years later the hospital smelled like clean floors and quiet tension. It was the same place Izuku Fushiguro had been born 4 years ago. Now, he was back, tiny legs swinging off the side of the examination bed, his green hoodie bunched around his small fists, a soft pout on his face. Inko stood beside him, gently rubbing his back, while Toji stood with arms crossed near the window, his face unreadable but alert. So he said it just happened, the doctor asked, flipping through a clipboard. Inko nodded. Yes, we were in the park with the Bakugos. Megumi, Izuku got pushed while playing tag and shadows suddenly poured out of the ground. Not just poured, Toji added, voice low. They moved. Formed shape. Intelligence. Dogs, Izuku said softly, eyes wide. A black dog and a white one. They listen to me. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Would you mind demonstrating again, young man? Izuku looked to his mom, then to Toji. Toji gave a small nod. Izuku took a breath and slid off the bed, then crouched slightly like his dad taught him and slowly pressed his little hands into the ground, index fingers and thumbs forming a triangle. A low hum passed through the room. The lights flickered once. The shadows beneath his feet stretched unnaturally wide. Then hum. 2. Distinct forms burst up from the ink-like puddle of darkness. One was sleek and black, its body like mist-cloaked muscle. The other was pure white, its fur soft and glowing faintly, like moonlight made solid. Divine dogs. Both creatures stood silently beside Izuku, tails up, staring protectively at the doctor. The room went silent. Incredible, the doctor whispered. They're alive. Toji stepped forward, eyes focused. They're Shikigami. The doctor approached cautiously and held out a small light scanner. When he tried to pass it over the black dog, the scanner shorted out. EM interference too, he muttered. Fascinating. Izuku looked up. I didn't hurt it, right? No, no. You didn't, the doctor smiled gently. Izuku, you did something amazing. May I speak with your parents for a moment? Quirk analysis room. 30 minutes later Izuku sat in the waiting area with Inko, drawing the two dogs on a piece of paper the nurse gave him. Toji stood in the consultation room alone with the doctor now. The specialist adjusted his glasses, eyes sharp. This is no ordinary quirk. Toji nodded. Tell me what you see. His quirk registers as a hybrid mutation. We're classifying it under both emitter and summon type, the doctor explained. The 10 shadows element is what we're calling the DMN trait. Toji narrowed his eyes. 10 shadows. The doctor turned the tablet toward him. From the recorded footage and energy readings, your son summoned 2 creatures made of solidified shadow matter. But our scans show he has potential for more than 10 unique entities. We think this ability is alive in some way, evolving with his emotional growth. And? Toji asked. There's more. We also found that his cellular structure is dense. Muscle fiber too thick for his age. Stronger skeletal layering. He's already built like a mini pro-hero. Toji raised a brow. You're saying, yes, the doctor confirmed. There's a second mutation, an inherited physical quirk. We cross-referenced your files, Mr. Fushiguro. Your quirk, what you called, heavenly restriction, it's partially present in your son. Toji leaned back, blinking slowly. He won the DMN lottery. In the car ride home Inko buckled Izuku into his seat while Toji climbed into the front passenger side, unusually quiet. So? Inko asked. Toji looked back at his son, who was hugging his paper drawing of the shadow dogs. Doctor says he has a hybrid quirk. It's called 10 shadows. 10. He only summoned 2. Exactly, Toji replied. That means there's more. A lot more. Inko's eyes softened. Is it dangerous? Toji thought for a moment. Only if no one teaches him how to use it. And the strength. Toji smirked. He's got my bones. Probably my fists too. That kid's gonna punch through walls before middle school. Izuku piped up from the back seat, does this mean I can be a hero like All Might? Toji and Inko turned toward him. Toji grinned. You're gonna be a hero they write legends about, kid. Inko smiled proudly, tears threatening her eyes. And we'll be right there every step of the way. Izuku giggled. Then I'll protect both of you too. The black and white dogs, quietly sleeping in his shadow, twitched their ears. The car had barely pulled out of the hospital parking lot when Toji turned halfway in his seat, one hand on the steering wheel and the other pointing at the back seat. "All right, brat," he said, grinning at his son in the rearview mirror. "Big day today. You awakened a beast of a Quirk, summoned 2 shadow dogs, scared a doctor, and made your old man proud." Izuku kicked his legs with excitement, still hugging the paper he drew on. "I did good, right?" "You did great," Inko said warmly from the passenger seat. "And you didn't set anything on fire or blow something up. That's already better than most kids at that age." Toji smirked. "So, we celebrate." Izuku's eyes widened. "Celebrate? Like cake and stuff?" "Even better," Toji said, flicking on the blinker. "We're going to that grilled meat buffet downtown. Unlimited food. And you can eat whatever you want today. Yiwa!" Izuku shouted, throwing his arms in the air in celebration. Wham! There was a loud metallic bang as his little fist accidentally smashed upward into the car ceiling. A clean dent formed above his seat like someone had dropped a dumbbell on it from the inside. The entire car went silent for a second. "Oops," Izuku whispered, freezing. Toji blinked slowly. Inko looked back at the ceiling. The dent stared back. "So," Inko said calmly, turning her head to her husband, "our 4-year-old just punched a dent in the ceiling." Toji exhaled and scratched his head. "Yeah. That's new." Izuku pouted, looking nervous. "Am I in trouble?" Toji turned back toward him and grinned like a devil. "Nah. No worries, brat. It's under insurance. We'll say a robber jumped on the roof and I punched him so hard through the window, it dented upward." Inko sighed. "Seriously?" Toji shrugged. "You want to tell the mechanic our kid did it with one hand while cheering?" "Fair point," she muttered. Izuku blinked. "So we're still getting grilled meat?" Toji laughed. "Hell yeah we are. A dent in the ceiling is nothing. You got your quirk today, Megumi Izuku. That's worth a feast." Inko smiled, looking lovingly at her husband and son. "You really are his father, huh?" Toji gave her a sideways smirk. "DMN right. He punches ceilings, I punch villains." They drove off as the sun dipped into a warm orange horizon. In the back seat, the 2 shadow dogs quietly emerged, curled around Izuku like loyal guardians, and drifted off into their shadow state again, content and full of pride. Today, the shadows barked for joy. And tonight, they would feast. Chapter 3, The Day Everything Changed. Time skip. 4 years later, the warm glow of the sunset spilled across the rooftops as Izuku Fushiguro, now 8 years old, walked home from his training session. He looked older now, taller, sharper, more composed. His eyes carried focus beyond his years, and his shadow walked a little differently than others because inside it, 10 great beasts slumbered. 9 of them were already his. Each tamed. Each trusted. The divine dogs white and black had merged into one, and became his most loyal ally. He had learned their names, their forms. His strength. Stable now. Measured. Controlled. Thanks to his father. Izuku beamed slightly, remembering his last spar with Toji earlier that week. "You're almost stronger than me, brat," he'd grinned. "Almost. But." That smile faded the moment he opened the front door. "Mom." The house was too quiet. He stepped forward, only to hear a choked sob from the living room. His heart dropped. "Mom." He ran in and saw her. Inko was on the floor, her phone dropped nearby, its screen cracked, the call still faintly connected. Her body was trembling, eyes wide with tears that wouldn't stop falling. Her hand clutched her chest like something had been torn out of her. Mom! What happened? She looked up, her lips quivering. Izuku, she whispered, voice broken. Your father, her words shattered. She couldn't say it. She didn't need to. Izuku's eyes widened. No, flashback, the secret mission. The sky was clouded. Heavy. Red lightning struck across the ruins of an abandoned city district, hidden from public sight. There, in the epicenter of hell, All Might stood, face grim. Across from him, the monstrous form of All for One, breathing heavily, wires sparking from his armor. And beside All Might Toji Fushiguro. His clothes were shredded. His body bruised. But his eyes. Sharp. Steady. Unbroken. All Might, he barked, behind you. A black tendril laced with pure destruction lunged straight for All Might's heart. Toji moved without thinking. He leapt into the blow, driving his fist into the tendril mid-air to slow it, but the moment it touched him, the left side of his torso was blown apart. He leapt into the blow, driving his fist into the tendril mid-air to slow it, but the moment it touched him, the left side of his torso was blown apart. Times Embrace, Izuku's power unleashed by Eterna Shadow 019 times Embrace. Izuku's power unleashed 1K607. He who controls time is he who controls the world. In a world with superpowers known as quirks. Those who are born without a quirk are weak. Those born with extraordinary spray of BLD filled the air. All Might's voice roared, Toji. But Toji didn't scream. He just smirked. You owe me now. Symbol of peace. Fueled by rage, All Might ignited his power, and with a mighty roar of fury and grief, smashed All for One across the battlefield. One blow after another. Bones shattered. Armor crumbled. Face destroyed. All for One fled into darkness maimed, but alive. But when the dust settled, Toji lay in All Might's arms, body limp, eyes half-lidded. You really punched him good, Toji chuckled weakly. Hey, good job, don't talk. All Might pressed down, trying to stop the bleeding. We'll get a medic. No use, Toji whispered. This was a one-way trip. I knew it. All Might's eyes trembled. Toji reached up with what strength he had left and grabbed All Might's collar. Listen to me, he rasped. Promise you'll look after my wife, my brat. Toji, he's strong, smarter than me. He'll be someone amazing one day. But he's just a kid right now. And Inko, she told me not to go. She begged me. But I did anyway. A tear slipped from his fading eye. I don't want them left behind, not alone. His voice faded then surged back, louder. Don't let my brat think he's got no one left. Don't let Inko cry alone. You hear me, All Might? Please, as a hero, as a friend, just. His breathing slowed. Tell her thank you. For loving a stray mutt like me. For giving me a son, for giving me a life. The last thing Toji saw in that broken skyline was Inko's smile in his memory. And Izuku's small hands reaching up toward him. Megumi-kun, one final breath. One last smile. You were my light, and the shadow of the strongest man vanished forever. Back to present, the grief of a family. Inko sobbed harder, gripping her son's arm. He saved All Might, they said he died saving him. Izuku's body trembled. He felt it like a cold wind rushing through his chest. No, he whispered. No, but his shadow shifted. From it, the divine dog emerged, curling silently at his feet. And one by one all 9 Shikigami surfaced around him. As if mourning with him. Izuku looked down, fists clenched. His voice was barely a whisper. Dad, he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply knelt beside his mother and held her as she broke. And inside, he made a promise. I won't leave her alone, Dad. I'll protect her. And I'll carry your shadow. Next day the skies over Mizutafu were a dull gray. Clouds hung heavy, the kind that looked like they could weep any second. But the rain held itself back as if even the heavens knew that today's sorrow needed no interruption. A quiet funeral was held. The guest list wasn't public, and there was no hero media, no national coverage. Because the man they were burying wasn't officially a hero. But they all came anyway. Every underground hero. Every friend who'd seen the shadow of a man who could match All Might in strength but never once asked for recognition. And standing at the center of them all were Inko Fushiguro, draped in a black kimono, her face pale and eyes sunken from nights of no sleep, and Izuku, clutching her hand tightly, dressed in a little black suit too big for his 8-year-old frame. The casket stood beneath a canopy of white lilies. It was closed now. But they had seen him earlier. Before the lid shut. Before he was taken from them. Earlier that morning they had brought Toji's body out of the secure facility. Izuku had run into the room the moment the door opened, Inko barely able to keep up. Her knees buckled the moment she saw him. Toji's left side was gone. Torn and collapsed, barely stitched together by the morticians. His body, once so strong, so full of energy, now cold and still. His lips no longer wore that smug smirk that always made Inko blush, or Izuku beam. "Dad," Izuku whispered, his hands trembling as he walked forward. "Tujai." Inko broke down, falling to her knees at his side. "Why? Why did you go? I told you not to." She sobbed into his chest, clawing at his coat like she could shake him awake. Beside them, Mitsuki and Masaru stood, both grief-stricken. Katsuki wasn't there. They had left him with Masaru's parents. It wasn't something a toddler should witness. Mitsuki was clenching her fists so hard, her nails had left crescent marks in her palms. She looked at Toji's still body and whispered under her breath, "You bstrd, you promised." She stepped forward and struck his casket softly with her fist. "You said you'd stay with her with Izuku. You were the only guy who could talk back to me without pissing me off. Why'd you have to die like this, you idiot?" Masaru wrapped an arm around her shoulders and guided her back. "Izuku," he whispered gently, kneeling beside the boy, "it's okay. Cry if you need to." But Izuku wasn't crying. He was staring. Frozen. Trembling but silent. He approached the body one last time, holding something small in his hand. A letter. Folded neatly, and trembling in his fingers. He reached up and gently tucked it inside his father's coat pocket, near his chest. "What's that, Izuku?" Inko whispered through her sobs. "It's a speech," he replied quietly. "I wrote it for Father's Day. But I can't read it anymore." Coffin. The funeral begins. The service was small, but solemn. Heroes and friends stood up one by one to say their words. Aizawa spoke briefly. He wasn't a man of many words. But the ones he did speak mattered. Hound Dog barked once before saying with a soft, hoarse tone, "He saved more lives in the shadows than most do in the light." Even All Might stepped forward, dressed in black, no smile on his face. His voice was heavy. "Toji Fushiguro gave his life for others. For me. I am still here only because of him. The world may not know his name, but I will carry it with me for the rest of my life." When it was Inko's turn, she could barely speak. But she held the microphone, glanced at her son, and managed to whisper, "You were my husband. My home. You were everything I never knew I needed. Thank you for giving me Izuku." Mitsuki held her while she cried. Masaru stood with a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Then it was Izuku's turn. Everyone waited. Expected. But the boy stood there, fists clenched, throat frozen. He tried but no words came. He shook his head and stepped back. No one pressured him. No one judged him. The casket was finally closed. And Toji was laid to rest. Envelope speech for a father. Later that night, long after everyone had gone, Izuku sat alone on the rooftop of their house. The wind was cold, and the moon sat high above the city. In his mind he imagined it. Standing before the casket again. This time he spoke. "Hi, Dad. You always told me not to cry. But today, I can't stop. You were my first sparring partner. My first teacher. My hero. People didn't know your name. But I did. I knew what you did for others. For Mom. For me. You weren't perfect. You swore too much. You left dishes in the sink. You forgot birthdays. But you always came home. Except this time you didn't. I know you died to protect someone. And I know you'd do it again. That's who you were. Thank you, Dad, for being the shadow that watched over us. I promise I'll grow strong. I'll protect Mom. I'll protect people. Just like you did." He imagined Toji standing up. Clapping. "You did good, brat." Izuku smiled through the tears. And finally, the wind carried his sobs into the night as he walked down the stairs back to his mother. The house was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful but hollow. Empty. As if the air itself was mourning. The only sound came from the soft hum of a TV and the occasional clink of glass. Little Izuku no Megumi, as his father had always called him, tiptoed down the stairs in his pajamas. His small hands held onto the railing tightly, the light from the living room casting a long shadow behind him. The flickering images on the screen showed familiar scenes, a grainy video Inko, in a simple white dress, laughing shyly as Toji slipped a ring onto her finger. The camera shook slightly, Mitsuki's voice muttering, "You better not mess this up, dumbass." Another clip, Inko in a hospital bed, hair messy, cheeks flushed, tears of joy falling as a nurse handed her a tiny, black-haired newborn. And beside her, Toji. His eyes wide. Hands shaking. Then soft laughter. "Hey, he's got my hair. Poor brat." Inko laughed back, "No lucky brat." Izuku stood there, watching. Inko sat on the couch, a half-empty wine glass in one hand, a box of tissues on the table. Her eyes were red, yet distant, lost in memory. She didn't notice him at first. "Mom." Izuku finally whispered. She turned slowly, startled, but softened instantly upon seeing her son. "Izuku, what are you doing awake, sweetheart?" I heard the TV, he said. He walked to her side, hesitating. "I saw you were watching the wedding." Inko smiled weakly and patted the couch beside her. "Come here, baby." He sat down, curling into her side like he did when he was little. She wrapped an arm around him. They watched the screen together as Toji grinned, holding a chubby baby Izuku up like he'd just won a prize. "I miss him too," Izuku whispered suddenly, voice cracking. Inko blinked hard. Tears rolled freely again. I know, sweetheart." "So do I, he always said I was strong," Izuku said, his head pressing against her shoulder. "But I don't feel strong right now." Inko kissed his head gently. "You don't always have to be strong, Izuku. Not for me. Not for anyone. But he'd want me to protect you. And I'll protect you too," she said. "That's what families do." There was silence after that. Just the quiet voices of the past echoing from the video. Then Toji's voice, clear, proud, "This is the best day of my life. Marrying this woman, having this little brat, never thought a guy like me could get this lucky." Inko smiled through her tears. "He really did love us." "I know," Izuku said. "And I'll never forget." They sat there long into the night, mother and son holding onto each other as memories of a man who lived in shadows flickered across the screen, still burning bright in the hearts he left behind. The next morning felt normal. Izuku had packed his bag, helped his mom with the dishes, and even smiled when Inko kissed his forehead before school. But the hole in his heart, the one shaped like Toji Fushiguro his father, was still there. Still fresh. Still bleeding. School had barely started when Katsuki Bakugo cornered him in the hallway. "Oi, Deku," Bakugo spat, hands in his pockets. "Heard your pops kicked the bucket." Izuku didn't answer. "Man, that's rough," Katsuki smirked, leaning in. "Guess it makes sense now why he ditched you too. Ran off and croaked like a coward." That stopped Izuku in his tracks. Slowly, he turned. His eyes, once soft and green, now dark and glassy. "What did you say?" "I said," Katsuki leaned in, grin widening, "your old man was a DMN who ran away like trash. Bet he couldn't handle having a weak son and a crybaby wife, smash." Before anyone could blink, Katsuki was slammed into the wall. A shadow pulsed beneath Izuku's feet. "You take that back." "What the hell?" "Take it back." From the swirling darkness rose Madoka, the deer-shaped Shikigami. From the swirling darkness rose Madoka, the deer-shaped Shikigami. Her gentle antlers glowed as the air shimmered, and suddenly, Katsuki's sparks fizzled. Dead silence. "My dad was a hero," Izuku hissed, stepping forward as tears streamed down his cheeks, rage trembling in every muscle. "He didn't abandon us, he died protecting people." Bakugo tried to move, but his quirk wouldn't work. The quirk suppression aura had activated. "And you dare call him a coward?" Izuku raised his fist and drove it into Katsuki's stomach. Then another. And another. "Say it again, huh? Say he ran again and I'll break your face." Bakugo stumbled, gasping. "TCH, my dad didn't run like yours." "That was it." Izuku snapped. "You Pomeranian rat." He tackled Bakugo to the ground, fists flying as Madoka stood still, passive, watching silently with her glowing antlers. The students screamed. A teacher rushed in. "Midoriya, stop." It took 4 teachers and 2 quirk barriers to pull Izuku off. He thrashed in their arms, still screaming, "He's lying. My dad was a hero. He gave his life for All Might. He called him a bastard, I'll kill him. He doesn't know anything. My dad had more guts than his whole family." Bakugo was bloodied, coughing, shaken but too proud to cry. When the dust settled, Izuku stood shaking, tears flooding his face, rage drained but not gone. "He doesn't know," he whispered brokenly. "No one knows my dad, not really." Principal's office. 30 minutes later, Izuku sat on the small couch outside the office, eyes red. His fists still clenched tight, knuckles bruised. Inko came rushing in, panicked. "Izuku baby, what happened?" He didn't look up. "He said Dad ran away, that he was a coward." Inko froze. A few minutes later, Mitsuki and Masaru walked in too, with a sore-lipped Katsuki trailing behind, arms crossed, eyes burning with silent fury. The school's principal, a strict old man named Shindo, came out. "This is serious," he said. "Izuku used a quirk in class. Attacked another student. But we've reviewed the situation and Katsuki provoked it deeply." Masaru sighed. "I'm sorry about what my son said. He didn't know." "He knew what he was saying," Inko said softly, hugging Izuku. "But I know he didn't understand what it meant." Mitsuki looked between them and sighed too. "We'll handle it at home." Katsuki glared, but said nothing. Meanwhile at Bakugo household, the air inside the Bakugo household was tense, thick with the weight of the situation. Mitsuki sat at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand. She had been trying to steady herself, but her anger bubbled up like a storm ready to burst. Katsuki was standing in front of her, his arms crossed defensively, face flushed with both the lingering sting from Izuku's punch and the discontent of what had just happened at school. "You've got a lot of nerve, brat," Mitsuki hissed. She threw her wine glass on the counter, slamming it down with a heavy thud that made Katsuki wince. "Do you know what you did?" She glared at him, her voice rising with every word. "Do you understand how much damage you caused? How much you insulted Izuku and his father, Toji. Katsuki clenched his jaw. I didn't mean it like that, Mom. I was just, no. Mitsuki cut him off sharply, her eyes wild with rage. You said it. You called Toji a coward, a bstrd. You spat on the memory of a man who sacrificed his life for people. You've crossed a line, Katsuki. A line I won't let you cross again. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. The moment her hand connected with Katsuki's cheek, it rang through the house. Slap. The impact was so forceful, it made Katsuki stumble back, his eyes wide in shock. He wasn't used to seeing his mother this angry. Mitsuki was usually fiery and headstrong, but this was different. You're not going to get away with this, Mitsuki continued, voice shaking with fury. Your father and I worked so hard to raise you, to make sure you understood what it means to be a hero. But instead, you're out here throwing insults at someone who gave everything so that people like you could sleep safe at night. Katsuki was speechless, his hand instinctively brushing the red mark on his cheek. I know Toji wasn't perfect, Mitsuki went on, her voice quieter now, but still seething with emotion. He wasn't the best man, but he was a man of honor. He was someone who didn't hesitate when it came to protecting others, no matter the cost. You have no right to speak about him like that, Katsuki. No right. Mitsuki took a step forward, and her expression softened, but her anger still simmered beneath the surface. If you ever talk like that about Izuku again, or anyone else especially when they're grieving, especially when they've lost someone they loved, I swear to God, I'll kick your butt. And don't think you're getting away with it. You will apologize to Izuku and his mom. If you don't, you can forget about being my son. You hear me? Katsuki's chest heaved with a mix of guilt and defiance. He couldn't stand it when his mother looked at him like this, like she was disappointed, like he had failed her. But deep down, he knew he deserved every bit of her wrath. He had crossed a line, one that even he couldn't ignore. Yeah. I get it, Mom, Katsuki muttered, though the words felt like they were forced from his throat. Mitsuki's expression softened slightly, but she didn't let up. Good. Now get your SHT together, because you owe that kid an apology. And you better make it right. She turned and walked out of the room, her steps heavy, leaving Katsuki standing there, his mind spinning with everything she had just said. He had never seen his mom this serious before, and it cut deeper than any physical blow. As Katsuki stood in silence, rubbing his cheek, his mind replayed the fight with Izuku. He hadn't meant for things to escalate like that. But hearing those words about his dad, about the things he said, made something snap inside of him. Meanwhile, at the Fushiguro home in the Fushiguro house, Izuku had finally calmed down after the earlier chaos at school. He sat with his mother, Inko, who was sitting beside him on the couch, comforting him. Izuku's mind still raced. He had stood up for his dad, for the memory of Toji, but it didn't feel like enough. There was still a lingering feeling of rage in his chest, the kind that only grew stronger when he thought of how Katsuki had disrespected his father's legacy. Mom, Izuku started softly, looking up at Inko, do you think he really understands what he said? Inko smiled softly, brushing a hand through his hair. I think he does, sweetheart. But sometimes people say things they don't mean, especially when they're hurt. And Katsuki has a lot of pride, a lot of anger. He probably doesn't know how to express it. But that doesn't mean he's not sorry. Izuku nodded, though his fists still clenched slightly. I don't want people to forget him, Mom. I want them to remember that Dad was a hero. Inko's smile widened, though her eyes were full of emotion. I promise, Izuku, we'll make sure no one ever forgets your father. He may not have been in the headlines, but his sacrifice was real. People like him are the true heroes. Izuku leaned against her, the warmth of her embrace soothing the sting left by the day's events. He had his mother's strength, and with that, he knew he could carry on his father's legacy. No one would forget Toji Fushiguro. Next morning the apartment felt quieter than ever. The smell of incense from Toji's funeral still lingered faintly in the corners of the room. His picture, placed gently on the family altar, smiled down at them calm, proud, gone. The shadows of grief still danced across the walls of their home, and though Izuku tried his best to be strong, Inko could see the cracks forming beneath her son's brave exterior. But it was her own heart that needed mending too. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of green tea untouched beside her, staring down at a crisp white envelope she'd received in the mail just this morning. The top corner read in neat gold letters, Toshinori Yagi Hero Agency, Camino Ward Branch. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a job offer. A formal one, typed with precision and care, bearing the seal of All Might's personal office. Dear Inko Fushiguro, after careful consideration and a personal recommendation from Toshinori Yagi, we would like to offer you a full-time position as Hero Relations Coordinator at the Camino branch of our agency. We believe your insight, communication skills, and unique perspective as a hero's wife and mother will be invaluable to our organization. Salary, competitive and negotiable based on experience. Housing, a furnished two-bedroom apartment will be provided near the agency. Additional, we have partnered with a private school in Camino to arrange enrollment for your son, Megumi Izuku Fushiguro, should you choose to relocate. Inko's breath caught. She blinked, letting the words settle into her mind. It felt surreal. Her hands trembled a little as she reached for the familiar blue and red All Might figurine resting on the bookshelf near Toji's photo, the same one Toji had given her on their first real date. You said you loved All Might, so I gotcha a tiny version. Don't worry, I didn't steal it, paid good yen for that chibi idiot. She smiled softly, remembering the day. And then her mind returned to All Might, his solemn face at the funeral, the way he clutched her shoulder and whispered, "He saved my life, Inko Toji took a hit meant for me. I would have died if not for him. You both deserved better. Let me at least try to make it right." That same day, he had handed her not just flowers and condolences but the envelope of funds from the Hero Association, and his own personal contribution. It was enough to live comfortably. Enough that Inko didn't have to work again if she didn't want to. But that was the problem. Sitting at home with silence and sorrow wasn't what Toji would have wanted. He would have called her a softie and told her, with a pat on the back, "You're too DMN strong to sit around and cry all day, Greenie." She wiped her eyes and laughed softly to herself. "Megumi," she called out to her son, who peeked his head out of his room where he had been quietly playing with his divine dog plushies. "Sweetie, can you come here for a sec?" He padded over, still holding the white pup. "What is it, Mama?" Inko knelt and showed him the letter. "This is from All Might's agency. They want me to work with them. And they've got a nice apartment ready for us in Camino. Even a school where you can train and learn more about your quirk." Izuku's green eyes widened. "We're moving." She nodded. "Only if you want to. But I think this would be good for us. A fresh start." The little boy looked at her, then up at Toji's picture. He seemed to think hard for a moment, then smiled. "Papa would have said yes," he said firmly, gripping her hand. "So let's go." Inko pulled him into a warm hug, her heart swelling with bittersweet hope. "Yeah, let's go." Later that night, under the soft glow of their living room light, Inko carefully packed away some of Toji's things. Not to forget but to carry them forward. She placed the All Might figure in a box, right beside Toji's old cracked sunglasses and a photo of the three of them at the zoo. "We're not forgetting you," she whispered to the memory. "We're just moving forward. Like you wanted us to." Outside, the stars shimmered over Muzurifu, but somewhere in Camino a new chapter was beginning. Next day the morning was hazy, painted in soft gray light as clouds loomed over Muzurifu. Inko stood by the doorway, her fingers gently adjusting the strap of her handbag while movers busied themselves behind her, carefully loading up the final boxes into a large transporter van. Inside those boxes were traces of the life she had built, photos, memories, laughter, tears, and echoes of a man who no longer walked beside her. Toji Fushiguro. Her husband. Her partner. The man whose absence was now a permanent weight on her soul. Today was the day she and Izuku no Megumi would be leaving Muzurifu for good. A new chapter in Camino awaited. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but it was one she believed was right. Just as she was signing the moving confirmation with the transport company, she heard a familiar loud voice storming up the street. Inko. Wait. Mitsuki Bakugo. She was dragging a very reluctant, sulking Katsuki behind her like a lioness scolding her cub. Her heels clacked loudly on the pavement, and her blonde hair flew like flames behind her. Katsuki looked uncomfortable, holding a bandage across his cheek from the recent fight with Megumi. I told you to keep your mouth shut. Mitsuki growled at Katsuki. And now look. You messed everything up, and she's leaving. Mitsuki. Inko blinked, surprised but calm. You didn't have to come, I did, DMN it. Mitsuki scowled but her eyes flickered with guilt. I needed to say sorry, we needed to say sorry. She yanked Katsuki forward. The boy gritted his teeth. Looking everywhere but directly at Inko or Megumi. TCH, he muttered. Whatever. I didn't mean, louder, Mitsuki snapped, elbowing him. Katsuki scowled harder, but then mumbled through gritted teeth. Sorry. For saying SHT about your dad. There was silence. Megumi stood behind his mother, arms crossed, green eyes narrowed not with fear, but quiet fury. His little fists were clenched so tightly his fingernails dug into his palms. Inko smiled softly, shaking her head. Mitsuki, it's okay. I'm not mad. You don't have to beat him up over it. I'm not leaving because of him. Mitsuki blinked. You're not. I got a job, Inko explained. At All Might's agency. It comes with housing and a school for Megumi. It's a good opportunity. She looked away for a moment, a sad smile playing on her lips. Besides, my idiot husband would have wanted me to move forward. He'd call me a softy for sitting still too long. A pang of grief passed through her words, but she steadied herself. That's when Megumi stepped forward, his expression sharp and cold. He looked right at Katsuki and said, "Let's go, Mom. It's no use being here." Megumi, Inko warned gently. But her son didn't stop. His voice rose slightly, trembling with restrained emotion. I don't care if it hurts his feelings. I want him to feel how it feels to lose someone. Someone who meant the world to you. He looked at Katsuki like he was looking through him. To me, you're a villain. Because only villains say stuff like that, like other people's feelings don't matter. Like their pain is a joke. Katsuki's face twitched. He opened his mouth but no words came. I'll drown you in shadows if I see your face again, Megumi whispered. Because you tried to throw dirt on the only hero that ever mattered to me. Mitsuki stepped in, reaching to place a hand on Megumi's shoulder, but he turned away, walking back to the car. Inko exhaled, watching the tension fall like a heavy curtain between the children. I'm sorry, Mitsuki said softly. Inko touched her arm and replied, You're not the one who needs to be sorry, Mitsuki. She turned toward the car where Megumi was waiting and climbed in beside him. The transporter door slid shut, and the engine rumbled to life. Katsuki watched silently as the van pulled away from the curb. The last thing he saw through the window was Megumi's sharp green eyes glaring back at him, eyes full of hurt, betrayal, and loss. Inside the van Megumi sat in silence, resting his head against the window, watching the city disappear in the distance. His mother's hand reached over, gently resting on his head. You okay? She asked softly. No, he muttered. But I will be. He turned to her and said, I won't forget Dad. And I'll make sure the world knows he was a hero even if it has to be through me. Inko smiled through the ache in her heart. He'd be proud of you, Megumi. He nodded, wiping a single tear from his cheek as they drove toward their new home. The street had quieted down. The transporter was long gone, the lingering rumble of its engine swallowed by the afternoon hum of the neighborhood. Mitsuki stood still at the sidewalk, arms crossed, eyes locked on the road where her best friend's car had vanished. Katsuki stood behind her awkwardly, arms at his side, his eyes cast down. The wind blew lightly, brushing through his messy blonde hair, but he didn't dare speak. Not yet. Mitsuki turned around slowly, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. She looked at her son glared. Her lips trembled, not with rage, but with frustrated sorrow. Then smack. A sharp slap echoed in the street as her hand connected with Katsuki's cheek. You stupid, happy brat, she hissed, her voice cracking with fury and pain. You just threw dirt on someone's wound, a wound that still bleeds. That's not funny, that's not smart, and it's definitely not heroic. Katsuki clutched his cheek, stunned. It wasn't the pain of the slap that silenced him, it was the look in her eyes. Her strong, unshakable mother was shaking. You don't understand what you said. What you did, she continued, her voice breaking. To that kid, his dad was the world. To Inko, Toji was the one who gave her a reason to smile again. Katsuki opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mitsuki sniffled, turning her face away from him for a moment. She was my only friend. She never judged me, never called me a loudmouth, even when I was one. And now, she turned back to Katsuki, eyes wet. Now she's gone too. Left me here because of you. The final word hit harder than the slap. Katsuki took a step back. I didn't mean it like that, I don't care what you meant, she shouted. It hurt them. And now Megumi's going to remember your face as the kid who insulted his dead dad. And Inko. She won't say it, but that wound just went even deeper. Mitsuki wiped her eyes roughly, furious at herself for crying. You think being a hero is about winning? About being stronger, she said, her voice low now. It's about protecting. It's about knowing when to shut up and be human. You think your quirk makes you tough. Words like that make you weak, Katsuki. She took a deep breath, regaining a bit of her composure. Let's go, she muttered, turning on her heel. We're going home. You're grounded. No TV, no games, no training until you learn what respect and empathy are. Katsuki didn't argue. He followed her in silence, the weight of her words sitting on his shoulders like a lead blanket. For the first time in a long time he felt small. And as they walked home, Mitsuki whispered, voice breaking again, you really are your father's son, sometimes too DMN proud for your own good. Behind them, the street grew quiet again. But the memory of Toji Fushiguro, his sacrifice, his love, his legacy lingered like a shadow that no light could erase. Well, for Megumi abilities here, as I have added some abilities according to this MHA world: Wolf-Faced Divine Dog, Eclipse Fong Small Orange Diamond Type, Assault plus Stealth Shadow Hunt Mode, becomes invisible in shadow-covered areas, Perfect Assassin. Fong of Severance, bites disrupt energy flows in the target's body, temporarily disabling physical movement, paralysis for 5 to 10 seconds. Tracker Bond, once it marks a target, the dog can track them across cities, no matter how far, unless they enter a quirk-canceling zone. Inspired by BLD plus Ninja Stealth High Voltage New, Thunder Lord Mode Small Orange Diamond Type, Aerial Control plus Battlefield Disruption Storm Resonance, charges the air with static to disable tech-based equipment, gadgets, support gear. Electrobrain Disruption, can emit lightning pulses that interfere with enemy brainwaves, causing dizziness or blackout if exposed too long. Lighting Surge Sync, can supercharge the user's body or Shikigami for enhanced speed and power for 10 seconds. Think EMP plus Stun Drone plus Support Booster Frog-Face Toad, Void Grip Warden Small Orange Diamond Type, Capture plus Zone Control Void Grip Tongue, generates a tongue that nullifies kinetic energy. It stops even speeding vehicles or powerful punches by absorbing motion. Zone Trap Belly can swallow a small group of enemies and trap them inside a pocket shadow space for up to 20 seconds. Time distortion makes it feel longer inside. Sticky Dome Wall slams its body to create a sticky shadow wall. Nothing gets through except light-based attacks. Utility Beast, ideal for crowd control, rescues, and locking enemies down. Snake Great Serpent, Shadow Coil Tyrant. Small Orange Diamond type, Burrower plus Sabotage Tunnel Curse, creates complex underground tunnel systems under the battlefield, allowing the user and allies to move freely or collapse paths on enemies. Energy Drain Fangs, every bite from the snake drains stamina or energy, like reducing enemy quirk output. Molting Illusion, can shed a shadow skin and appear to be somewhere else, used to confuse or ambush enemies. Works like a sabotaging rogue assassin and transport system. Elephant Max Elephant, Abyss Flood Engine. Small Orange Diamond type, Heavy Assault plus Terrain Control. Black Tsunami, creates a wave of dark matter flood from its trunk that washes enemies away and extinguishes fire. Explosive Quirks. Gravity Pulse Steps, each stomp increases localized gravity for enemies, makes them heavier and slower. Water Memory, remembers paths it floods, can redirect flow again to flood enemies behind cover. Battlefield Shaker plus Anti-Mobility Unit. Rabbit Face Rabbit Escape, Phantom Echo Swarm. Small Orange Diamond type, Distraction plus Speed. Utility Clone Stampede, creates dozens of illusionary rabbit clones that can reflect light and sound, creating phantom noise, footstep confusion, and fake visual trails. Blink Warp, the user can swap places with any rabbit once every 15 seconds. Sonic Dash Loop, one rabbit charges up and creates a mini sonic boom to disorient enemies. A Chaos Engine, great for stealth ops and confusion tactics. Ox Piercing Ox, Rampart Titan form. Small Orange Diamond type, Charging Tank plus Defense. Momentum Lock, once charging, no quirk or object can stop it. Barrier Quirks crack, telekinesis snaps under strain. Shock Barrier Field, creates a ripple effect around its body, deflecting projectiles like a riot shield. Auto Grapple Horns, hooks onto enemy weapons or limbs and crushes them during impact. Chapter 4 Camino Shadows and New Beginnings. The sky had long since darkened by the time the moving van finally rumbled into Camino Ward, its headlights casting elongated shadows over the quiet streets. A soft drizzle had begun to fall, speckling the windows and creating ripples in the faint puddles that dotted the ground. Inside the vehicle, Inko Fushiguro gently turned to her sleeping son. "Megumi," she whispered softly, brushing a few locks of black hair from his eyes. "We're here, sweetheart. Come on, we made it." Megumi stirred, blinking blearily. "Camino," he mumbled, still half asleep. She smiled and nodded. "Yes, baby. Home for now." The transport stopped in front of a modern mid-rise apartment complex. The building was sleek, well-maintained, and surprisingly spacious for city living. It had clean concrete pathways, safety railings, a private rooftop, and glowing neon signs in soft gold letters reading, "Silver Dawn Residences, Hero Housing sponsored by All Might Foundation." As Inko stepped out, helping Megumi down with their few hand-carried bags, a tall man stood waiting beneath the awning near the front door. He was dressed in a brown trench coat, wide hat pulled low over his blonde hair, and a pair of large sunglasses, comically large, actually. "Ma'am Fushiguro," the figure said in a very distinct voice, instantly recognizable even through the disguise. Inko blinked in surprise, and Megumi, now more alert, straightened up as his eyes went wide. "All Might," the boy whispered. The man gave a sheepish chuckle, glancing side to side before lifting his sunglasses slightly. "Shoo. Not so loud, young man. The neighbors might not be used to a symbol of peace moving in next door." Inko covered her mouth in surprise. "You didn't have to come greet us personally," All Might gave her a warm smile. "Of course I did. I wouldn't leave something this important to a DLVRY note." He reached out and gently took one of the heavier bags from her hand. "Thank you for accepting the job," he said sincerely. It means more than I can say, Inko. Your husband Toji saved my life that day. The least I can do is make sure you and your son have the life he fought for. Inko's lips quivered at the memory of Toji, but she steadied herself and nodded. He would have liked this place, she said, looking up at the glowing lights of the building. Said something stupid like, not bad for a ghost, huh? Megumi, still holding one of his plushies tightly, looked up at the symbol of peace. You really fought with my dad, didn't you? All Might kneeled down, resting a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. I did, he said, his voice carrying the gravity of memory. He was one of the bravest heroes I've ever known. And one of the loudest, roughest, most annoyingly stubborn ones too. He chuckled. But when it mattered he never hesitated. Megumi nodded slowly, gripping his plush tighter. I want to be like him. You already are, All Might smiled. He stood again and guided them to the lobby door. Your apartment is on the top floor. Great view. Furnished. I even stocked the fridge, don't worry, I know what kids like. Inko turned with sincere gratitude. Thank you really. You're making it easier to keep going. All Might bowed his head slightly. That's what heroes do. And if you ever need anything, my office is 5 blocks down. Just ask for Mr. Yagi. Megumi tilted his head. That's your other name. All Might winked. Just for paperwork. With a final wave, All Might turned and vanished into the rainy Camino night. Inko and Megumi entered their new home. The apartment was cozy, clean, and warm. The living room had a small fireplace. The walls had subtle murals of clouded skies. On the dining table was a small bouquet with a card that simply read, Welcome home Toshinori. Megumi looked out the window, spotting the towering silhouettes of Camino's skyline. Inko stood behind him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. It's not what we had before, but we'll build something new. For him. The boy nodded, eyes shining. Tomorrow, he whispered, I'll train even harder. Meanwhile the Bakugo household, usually buzzing with Mitsuki's booming voice and Katsuki's rebellious grumbling, was unusually quiet. Not a pan slammed. Not a single curse word echoed through the walls. No TV, no training explosions, just silence. Masaru Bakugo walked into the house, gently closing the door behind him. He took off his coat, listening intently. He expected to hear Mitsuki yelling at Katsuki or Katsuki sulking in his room, but neither came. Instead, the house was eerily still. Weird, Masaru muttered, loosening his tie and stepping further in. He walked past the living room and noticed the boys' room door was closed. Not uncommon, but today it felt heavier. He made his way to the kitchen. And there, leaning on the counter with her back to him, stood Mitsuki. She wasn't moving, just staring blankly at the coffee cup in her hands. A half-empty wine bottle sat nearby, untouched since she brought it back from Inko's place. Her shoulders were shaking ever so slightly. Mitsuki. Masaru stepped closer. Are you crying? She didn't answer at first. But he heard it, the sniffle she tried to cover, the sharp inhale. She turned slightly away, hiding her face with her arm. Masaru walked up beside her and gently placed a hand on her back. Hey, what's wrong? Mitsuki let out a harsh exhale. You saw how she looked, Inko. And Megumi. I know, he said softly. I messed up, Mitsuki choked. My stupid kid, my idiot brat. He ran his mouth like he always does, but this time he said something he can't take back. Masaru frowned gently. Mitsuki, it wasn't your fault. Katsuki, he's my son, Masaru, she snapped, but the anger wasn't at him, it was at herself. He learned how to run his mouth from me. He watched me curse, insult people, fight with everyone around me. You think that didn't rub off? Masaru said nothing. He just listened. I told myself it was harmless. That it was just how we are. But that boy, her voice cracked, Megumi's been through hell. He lost his father. He watched his mom break down. And then what? My kid says his dad abandoned them. She wiped her eyes angrily, shaking. Inko looked at me like she forgave me, but it still hurt. She left, Masaru. She left without even raising her voice. And now I feel like I've lost my best friend all over again. Masaru gently pulled her into a hug, and this time she didn't resist. You didn't lose her, he whispered. She's just hurting. And she knows you are too. Mitsuki gripped the fabric of his shirt tightly. I hate feeling useless, I hate this. I hate that I can't fix it. Masaru just held her, swaying slightly in place. We'll make it right. Give it time. We'll talk to Katsuki. We'll apologize properly. We'll help Megumi see we're not all heartless. I miss her, Mitsuki muttered. That loud, messy girl with stupid jokes and a crooked smile. Inko was the first person who liked me as I am. Masaru smiled sadly. She still does. She just needs time to believe it again. Mitsuki nodded slowly, resting her forehead against his shoulder. You're too good for me, you know that. I know, he said softly, smirking. But I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you. And in the silence that followed, Mitsuki finally let herself cry. Also at new house of Fushiguro family, the new apartment was clean. Too clean. The walls were pale, freshly painted. The wooden floor barely creaked. A shelf sat neatly by the window, filled with unopened books and unopened memories. But the room felt hollow, like it didn't know him yet. Like it didn't know who used to laugh in his old room, who used to sleep with the sound of his dad's voice in the background, or the smell of burnt fish from his mom's attempts at cooking without supervision. Izuku no, Megumi Fushiguro now sat silently at the edge of his bed. His knees curled up to his chest, his fingers clinging to a photograph frame like it was the last thread keeping him tied to something real. The photo was old, maybe 2 summers ago. Toji stood tall, shirt half open, holding a split watermelon in one hand like he was flexing for the camera. His grin stretched from ear to ear, wild and full of pride. Next to him, little Megumi posed with another cracked watermelon beside him, mimicking his father's pose with a proud puffed chest. Inko was in the background, hands to her cheeks and shouting something about both of her idiots breaking things again. The sand under their feet was messy. The ocean behind them was blue and endless. Megumi wiped his eyes, but more tears came. He hadn't said much since they moved. Inko tried to be cheerful, and All Might had done his best to welcome them. But his dad wasn't there. The air didn't carry the scent of oil and sweat and sake anymore. There were no quiet chuckles from the kitchen when Toji tried and failed to cook something edible. Only silence. 2 shadows shifted quietly across the room. His faithful divine dogs, black and white, padded over to him. They didn't bark. They didn't growl. They simply nudged their snouts against his arms and rested beside him on the bed, one on each side like silent guardians. Dad, Megumi whispered, voice cracking. He held the frame tighter. I trained so hard today just like you said I should. But you weren't there to watch. You said I'd be strong like you. That I'd be better. That even when you weren't there I'd carry your will. His voice broke then. His shoulders trembled. But I don't want to carry anything, he sobbed. I just want you back. The divine dog, Black, leaned in, nuzzling his cheek gently. The white one curled tighter around his side. Their presence wasn't just summoned beasts, they were family. Reflections of his soul. Parts of the bond his father helped him understand. I'll protect Mom, Megumi whispered. I promise I'll make you proud. Even if that dumb Pomeranian ever shows up again, I won't let anyone say your name like it's dirt. You were a hero. You saved All Might. You saved me. He kissed the corner of the photo and clutched it to his chest. I miss you, Dad, and in that dim room, surrounded by shadows and grief, Megumi Fushiguro wept. But he wasn't alone. The shadows heard him. The beasts stayed close. And somewhere in the depths of his growing power, his father's strength lived on. Next day the sun was barely above the rooftops when Megumi Fushiguro stood at the gate of his new school in Camino Ward. His uniform.